Hey Violin Channel, my name is Stefan Jackiw and I play the violin. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about how I come up with bowings and fingerings for a piece that I'm working on. I thought I would use as an example the very opening of the Korngold Violin Concerto, which is one of my favorite pieces, and I think gives a good opportunity for us to sort of look at how one would come up with bowings and fingerings for a piece. So usually, I try to follow the composer's bowing markings as closely as possible. These are sort of expressive ways in which the composer groups notes together, and if at all possible, I think it's a good idea to try to follow what he or she indicated. But sometimes a composer writes slur markings that just aren't realistic, and so then we have to divide up the slurs in a way that will work for us, but still sort of maintain the arc that the composer intended. So this opening of the Korngold Concerto, well, I'll play first exactly what he wrote. So obviously, I sound like a scared little mouse playing like that, so I can't do that on stage. So I have to divide up the bow somehow. So thinking about the opening, for me, the first most interesting note is the fifth note, the G sharp. This. Because that note does not belong in the harmony that is set up and is being played by the orchestra. So it's kind of like a blue note. So I need more bow there to be more expressive with that note, to bring out the fact that that's sort of an exotic sound. So I could start a new bow on that note, in which case I would kind of have a new beginning on that note, or I could change bows earlier so that that note is linked in to a new bow so you don't hear a bow change. So here are two options. The first is if I change the bow earlier, I have or if I change the note on the bow, so there is no right or wrong answer. The two viable options. After kind of fiddling around a bit, for me, I feel more convinced changing the bow on the G sharp, but that is a personal preference. So now there's the issue of fingering. So Korngold didn't write any fingerings, or didn't really indicate what strings even he wanted the music played on. So it's completely up to us. So a kind of obvious choice, I think, and it's marked moderato nobile, so a moderate tempo played nobly, would be, an obvious choice would be to, I think, vibrate at least the long notes, which would sound like, which sounds completely unobjectionable. But I was thinking more about how that first G sharp is such a special sound, and also something about the opening has a kind of like wide-eyed, fresh wonder, even a kind of like mysticism. And I was thinking that maybe even no vibrato, or maybe even open strings, so that I have this kind of open blank sound before the G sharp, could sound interesting. So that sounds like this. So it's not quite as warm as using vibrato on the A versus, but what you sacrifice in warmth, I think you gain a sort of like otherworldly mysticism in the sound, which I like. So moving on, our second phrase is, so here, it's more than the first phrase. The first phrase is marked piano. The second phrase is marked mezzo piano, espressivo, so more expressive, and there are more swells, raising and diminishing in dynamics. So more is going on. It's more involved. So because of that, I divide up the bow even more than the first phrase. Now this next section kind of has two subsections. The first being The second being... So, for me, the first section has much less kind of potential energy than the second. The first section is kind of just noodling around 4 notes in different rhythms, just kind of playing around this pattern. So it's not really going anywhere. We end up exactly where we started. And the second one leads us back to the first theme with introduction of the B. And then we keep going. So something in the second one has to signal to us that we're going somewhere as compared to the first one. So how does that influence my fingering? I decide to play the entire first one on the A string, which has a kind of a more hushed quality. And then I start the second one also on the A string, but then I cross over to the E string to give it more kind of direction. So the idea behind all of this is that I'm trying to find a way, both with my right hand and my left hand, to kind of bring out what I think are the important phrase and emotional and directional aspects of the music, and try to give it as much color as possible and kind of to show where the music is leading us through use of the bow and the left hand. Thanks for watching.